Welcome back to Screenfish Radio. I'm so glad you could join us this week as we are talking about Oscar winner for Best Picture, CODA. And I am so thrilled with the people that I can have on today. I'm so blessed with this show that I get to talk to wonderful people, and I have wonderful people today. Returnee Deb Whalen and newcomer Sallyanne Hadzalic. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
But I'm really excited to talk about CODA with you both. I really am. Before we do that, I feel like we need to debrief at least a little bit on last weekend's Oscars. There was an awards show that happened in the middle of a boxing match, and there were other things to discuss, but I would love to know from you both, since we all know CODA won Best Picture, but not just that. I mean, other moments. Do you watch the show? If you are there moments that did stand out to you, even if you didn't?
I meant to watch it and I just got busy, but I recorded it. But the moment that I think stood out to me the most was that cute little moment between Lady Gaga and Liza Minnelli. Respecting our elders, especially those who have disabilities, is not something I feel like society does really well. And in an attempt to help, we take over. And everything I saw and read from the moment was that she graciously supported Liza to be her own beautiful self while keeping the moment rolling, right? Like Gaga didn't succumb to the pressure of like, oh, we got to present this. Oh, we got to move on. But it was very much like Liza and Gaga presented this award together, despite Liza's clear confusion about the moment, which I thought was really cute.
Yeah, that moment could have gone completely the other way.
Yes.
When she brought her out, that was exactly what I was afraid. I did watch it live because it's the Super Bowl for me.
Sure. This is kind of your job.
Yeah.
It's my Super Bowl. I watched the red carpet too. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You just love seeing people's nails?
Their nails.
Their dresses with their bags.
I love those things. I'm all in. It's anyway. Yeah. But yeah, when I saw that, I was terrified, like genuinely terrified, because I mean, she's lovely, but she's not well.
Yeah.
And this could have come across.
How old is she now?
I thought I saw
a million.
I'll find out.
Like she's been around forever. You know, like we're lucky that we still have her, right? After everything she's been
go with
through.
The correct age, but both of you were like.
I got it. She's 76.
Like
a legend. They're timeless, ageless.
Yeah. She's gonna have some stuff up with her, you know, with her body, with her mind, and They
seemed clearly set up for that, though. Like, I saw the clip, and so Liza had her own little cards. Like, nobody was expecting Liza to read the teleprompter or memorize her, 7 lines. Like, they seemed quite set up for Liza to kind of struggle through as best she could.
Good.
Which I thought was really great, versus, hoping that she was going to depend on something. But it was still really sweet. Like, it easily could have gone the other way, where Lady Gaga just took over and left Liza sitting there, right? It easily could have gone the other way.
Or worse, she doesn't do enough, and Liza looks even worse.
Right.
I was worried about that too, where that's actually what worried me most, because there were several moments where Liza was struggling. She was struggling. And I sat there and I was like, oh no. But there was a delicate balance that Lady Gaga walked. It ended up being quite beautiful.
That doesn't surprise me, because Lady Gaga seems to have, I mean, when we see her interact with fans, when we see her championing different kinds of people, right? Like, her fans are called her little monsters because she champions the cause of, you know, the freaks and the geeks and everyone who sort of gets disenfranchised automatically because they don't fit on the cover of a magazine or whatever. She's really, really good at honoring the humanity in people, regardless of where they come from, because she's been bullied. Like, she's been someone who's had to sort of push back against that kind of stuff. And man, Yeah, like so that does it. Her behavior and her first of all her respect of Liza. Anyone who acts disrespectfully towards Liza Minnelli, like I know that there are jokes that we can make about different things that have happened over the years, but like she's done her time and she has made her mark on the world of entertainment time and time again. So if anyone is going to be respected, no matter their condition, like Liza is someone who deserves that. But I think Lady Gaga is someone who she's just proven to me that she's a very respectful, like honor and love people's humanity no matter where they're at. So it doesn't surprise me that she carried herself very well in those moments.
Yeah, Gaga has my opinion of Gaga has completely changed over the years. I admit, like I saw her as a one-trick pony, when she came out, and now it's Gaga, oh la la, it's rah rah. I'm sitting there, I'm making fun of it and all this stuff. And then I saw her activism. I was like, okay, but a lot of people are activists. What I saw from her though was a respect for everyone. Look at Tony Bennett, for crying out loud. She's done like 2 albums with Tony Bennett.
Yeah.
She respects the history. She respects the craft. And so that has really impressed me about her. And I mean, she seems lovely. She, like you said, but when she first came out, she was like, she sold herself to break into the industry. I understand all that a certain way. And I thought, oh, here we go again. It's another pop star. But what she's wonderful. She's done so many wonderful things. And I think she was the right person to have that moment with under the circumstances. I think she did an incredible job. And, and Liza she made Liza look better. And I think that's, I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just mean that
she allowed
sort of a celebration. Yes, thank you. That's a better way to say it. She allowed Liza to shine.
And that's a skill. As somebody who supports individuals who have physical and developmental disabilities, or used to in my previous job, that's a skill. To do that well, to like empower while physically supporting is a fine line that not a lot of people are able to do.
Yeah.
So for me, as somebody who used to work in a role like that, it was lovely to see.
Were there other standouts for you? I know I don't think either of you have watched them live, but anything that you've seen or anything in particular?
Troy Kotsur. Kotsur, yes, Troy Kotsur. His win. There have been a few deaf people in my Facebook feed who have been championing that moment. So that was really, really lovely to see. And although I did find it kind of funny that people are like, the first deaf man to ever win an Oscar. And I was like, oh, okay, so Marlee Matlin's just chump change now. Like, a woman did it first. Thanks very much. I don't know. It's like, oh, let's champion, like, the first deaf man. And I'm like, I don't know. It just...
To be fair, she's championed. She is championed. She is beloved by the Academy as the first deaf woman.
Sure, but I'm a bitter, jaded, black-hearted kind of person.
Bring it. Tell us your story.
I feel like they both won because they're deaf in films. She won for Child of a Lesser God, which at the time was a crazy film for somebody to make. Somebody is going to put a deaf character as a main actor, and they're not going to, like, subtitles weren't a thing in 1986, right? 1985 when that movie came out. And so the man who played opposite her did a lot of their interpreting, but some of it was just silent. And it was a beautiful film, and if you haven't seen it, you should see it. It was a really beautiful film for its time, and it struck a nerve, I think, for a lot of deaf who grew up in a residential school as well. But it felt like she got the Oscar because she happened to be deaf. And I feel like we could pick out certain Oscar winners over the years, like Abigail Breslin when she was 12. Like, I feel like we could pick out certain winners for certain roles at the time that feel and still feel like tokenism.
Sure.
And so I feel like Troy and all the conversation, and I'm not discounting his win. That's not what I'm doing. He is a phenomenal actor who has put in his time.
That was going to be my question. Was he not the best actor?
I'm not. He, like, for people in the community, we know Troy. Like, we knew what he was capable of. We've seen him on all the Nightline shows, like, not Nightline, but like Law and Order, Criminal Minds, like all the shows.
The Mandalorian.
I hope you didn't see him on Nightline. That's Nightline. You don't want to see him on there.
Different.
English is not my
different
first
show.
language. English is not my first language, but anyways.
I'm sorry.
No, Law and Order, Criminal Minds, all those kind of shows. Sue Thomas FBI, like we've seen him on those shows. Jeff West, he's done a number of Jeff West Broadway productions. We all knew, the community knew what he was capable of. But it still feels, I think, especially with this like first deaf man, or like why isn't he just the first deaf actor? Because Marley is the first deaf actress. And so like I don't know, I think there's always going to be a hint of ableism in when anybody but I also feel like that way when like LGBT people win, and it's like the first LGBT, and I'm like, forget, we're just people.
Yeah.
Like, why can't it just be that Troy Kotsur won his first Oscar after 20 years in the industry or whatever?
Well, and like, if we're going to be real, you know, like there's a lot of criticism about, you know, the lead up into the Oscars and how nominations are done. And like people talk about Oscars being bought all the time because they threw the best party and they knew how to talk to the people the right way and whatever. And like, so whoever, you know, makes up the Academy and who's connected to who, you know, like the awards sometimes feel like they only mean so much anyway. And then on the flip side, sometimes we can still use that kind of attention to make statements and to get the spotlight on people who deserve it. Yeah. And while it's not ideal, while it's not pure necessarily, like people's intentions are not really about like we need to, you know, put the spotlight on these people who are not getting enough attention or whatever, you know, like it's not altruistic, but like use the moment when the spotlight is on you. And I think like there were some moments in CODA that I was kind of like, this is some Hollywood romanticism right here. Like there's some tokenism. But again, like there are so many people who are experiencing deaf culture through this film for the first time. And it's good that they are. And hopefully they'll put some work into seeing what that's actually like, you know, like seeking out opportunities to get more of that and to become more sensitive, to become more aware. That's the hope.
What I loved though was for all 3 CODA wins, the whole audience was cheering, like clapping in a deaf centered way. And that was really like to see like Tyler Perry and like people I knew and loved like clapping appropriately was really nice to see, because without fail, even at like a wedding where you're like deaf people clap like this, somebody always audibly claps, right? Oh, like without fail it happens. But it was nice at the Oscars to see that like 98% of that audience was clapping in a way that was visual. That was very like heartwarming.
Awesome.
You know, here I agree with you both fully. And here's my hot take. The reason I love the Oscars is because it really has nothing to do with what's best and what isn't. It doesn't. Right. It's okay. Like we could sit here personally, and we'll get into CODA. Do I think it was the best film of the year? No, I don't. Loved it. Not the movie I would have picked personally. Right. Because there's no way to quantify best.
Yes.
There's no way to quantify it. It's not like the Olympics where the best runner goes to, there's no mathematical equation that has to fit. That's just not how the arts work.
There's no like checklist.
That's
like,
right.
You had this, you had that.
So people that argue that the Oscars are too political or all of these things, it's frustrating to me because of course they are. Like and this is what I like about the last few years. They've really been trying to emphasize things like diversity. So now again, a white middle-aged male, so it's I have, you know, I am not the token for diversity. Let's put that. I'm not. I guess straight. I'm not even gay. I'm sorry. I'm not. I'm not the target for diversity. I admit it, but I appreciate the fact that the Oscars are trying to emphasize diversity. This was the first first Oscars with an all African American production team. They are you could argue that there's much further to go, but they're trying. So you know, the winners, when you look at the winners of the big four, actually the big six, you know, you've got only the third woman director, second in a row to win. You've got Ariana DeBose, who is just phenomenal in West Side Story, just phenomenal. And in her speech says, I'm the first, I'm never good with the names. I think she said Latina or Latinx. I'm not sure.
I would imagine she said Latinx because she identifies as an LGBT.
She said that. I did not know that.
She would have said Latinx versus Latina or Latino if she's trying to include everybody.
Right. So she wins, pronounces that. I had no idea.
Right.
Troy Kotsur wins. Will Smith wins. And, you know, the list of African Americans who have won Best Actor, it's highly limited. Maybe 4 over the years who have won the Best Actor category. And then you've got Jessica Chastain as well. That's right. This is good. And I think that what the Oscars is about honoring the industry. And yet we all argue about, of course, though it's more fun to try and figure out, and then, you know, who's going to win, who isn't, to me.
Yeah. Right.
But like the Oscars themselves they're not a math class. You can't score them the same. So there's always these things about what's best. And that's what I like about them. You know, that's what I appreciate about them, because they're trying to tell stories that resonate. And the films this year, I mean, some of them were not very good that were Best Picture, but some of them were just remarkable films, all wildly different. Right. And I appreciate that fact. So, I mean, I hear everything you're saying, and I agree with you, and that's why I like them. Not the tokenism. I don't see it as tokenism. I like to. No, that's not what I'm saying.
You also love politics.
I do.
On the topic of trying, though, and this is a conversation I'm having in real life, like, it's 2022. When is trying not enough? So the Oscars is trying to up their accessibility features as well, for lack of a better term, right? So they have a ramp. They're doing ASL interpretation. So this year what they did is they provided a live interpreter on their Oscar live stream. So it was accessible via YouTube. English was not, for a lot of deaf people who are born deaf and raised within residential school and culturally deaf, English is not their first language. American Sign Language is. So captions are often not enough for a lot of deaf people. So
Sallyanne, can you tell us the difference between spoken English and American Sign Language?
Well, American Sign Language, like any language, has its own. So back in like the 70s, a professor out of Gallaudet University, located in Washington, did research to decide whether or not sign language was just a method of communication, much like writing or texting is, or whether American Sign Language was indeed a language and had rules, syntax, grammar, structure, much like English, Italian, French, or any other spoken language that we talk about. And he conceded that American Sign Language, ASL, is in fact a language and has all those things, those check marks, those boxes, to make it a language and not just a communication method.
Like a version of English.
Yeah, not just a mode, right? So when we talk about like pidgin or signed exact English, those are modes of communication. They're two languages together, a contact language. We often see it in people who like move here from, say, like somebody's grandmother who's Italian and can have one conversation using both languages because she lacks words in each. That would be like contact language. So my first language is actually contact language. I don't have one. I grew up using English and signs mapped together because that's what my parents used. And now I have English, but it's very much not my first language. So for a lot of deaf people, they use American Sign Language and then learn English using that, right? You can't learn your L2 without your L1. And ASL just has a different, much like French, has a different topic, comment, subject, object. The way ASL is formatted is very different than the way we use nouns and pronouns and verbs in English. So they had an interpreter for the Oscars this year, a live interpreter, which is great. But instead of doing picture in picture, which everybody has the technology to do so, including tiny little TV shows like Kelly Clarkson, who had CODA on and managed to do a picture in picture interpreter for her whole show to make it accessible, on top of having interpreters in the live audience for the CODA cast. The Oscars put it on YouTube. A lot of deaf people, particularly in the States, don't have that privilege to have cable and internet. And if they do, then they don't have two devices. Like, there's a lot of barriers. Quite a few deaf people are on assistance. That's just, like, there are a lot of people that do work and are productive members of society, but then there are a lot, because of the systematic barriers society has placed in front of them, happen to be on assistance. And so the fact that the Oscars was like, yeah, an interpreter, we're accessible, but then put it on a paid platform, YouTube, that required two devices or at-home internet streaming was very inaccessible. And to me, it was kind of like a slap in the face. Like, what's the point in doing it if you're going to put all these barriers to getting it in the first place?
Well, it's ironic because it's about accessibility, right?
It's about accessibility, and picture in picture is something the Oscars do all the freaking time. I was going to swear. Can I swear? Probably not. They do it all the time. They literally do picture in picture all the time. Every major news broadcaster has the power to do picture in picture. Kelly Clarkson can do it. So can anybody else. I don't know.
But Kelly Clarkson cares.
Her episode about CODA was actually, everybody should go watch it. It was like, it was the epitome of what accessibility should look like.
Amazing.
If you're going to have a deaf cast on and you're going to bring in an audience who is primarily deaf, it was the epitome of how you meet their needs where they're at.
Man, so I don't know if she is as stand-up an individual as she comes across, or she just has the right people doing the right things, but she looks real good.
I was blown away. I watched that episode a couple times now. It was phenomenally lovely. And that's the first time she's had deaf people on the show.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Put it on your list. Kelly.
Fair enough.
What else do you want to talk about, Steve? What else happened?
Well, I don't really want to talk about it, but we need to. If we're going to talk about it, we might as well.
Oh, okay. But you know what's annoying about that to me, though? Is that it's ableism, too. Jada could not stand up for herself. And so Jada can't stand up for herself. And then Will slapped Chris Rock. But are you literally telling me that not a single person who, like, and we all know that there's like an assistant to a producer to an assistant, blah, blah, blah. Not a single person was like, hey, Chris Rock, Jada just came out and said that she's been struggling with alopecia and it's really personal to her. Not a single person told him? Come on.
There are so many layers to this, and it should, when you see it shouldn't necessarily be the case, but there are a number of layers to it, and I think that's why it's got everybody talking. Other than the fact that the shock value of a well-respected celebrity went up and slapped another well-respected celebrity in the face on live television, during one of the most broadly broadcast shows of the year. It would be like if Tom Brady went up and slapped the opposing quarterback in the middle of the Super Bowl.
And then he got to sit in the audience, and he still got to accept his award later.
Yeah, there was no security.
There was nothing. It's Tyler Perry and Samuel L. Jackson trying to like calm him down during.
No, Denzel.
Denzel.
And Denzel is, you don't need security if you've got Denzel. Okay, Denzel is the man. I adore him. I don't think that they needed to call security. Personally, everybody talks about that. I don't know whether he should have been there or not. I think they were just trying to mediate the situation because he was 5 minutes away from winning and everyone knew it. But I like, it was over. It was over. Everyone knew it was over. So unless you're going to drag Will Smith out in handcuffs you know, for which I'm not saying there shouldn't have been some conversation, but I'm just saying, like, it wasn't like he was trying to beat him to death or something. Like, it was that he sat down, and then it was, so I to me, that's like, okay, well, that's why security wasn't called. But I mean, I don't know.
Will Smith had not been Will Smith, and Chris Rock had not been Chris Rock, and they had been two black men on the corner of any state in America,
or in a bar,
or anywhere else, and one had slapped the other, it would have been a very drastic ending. And there are Americans, particularly African Americans, sitting in jail for a whole lot less.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not denying that. There's a layer of privilege.
There's
too.
A lot of and even there's a layer of, like, there are other celebrities off the top of my head where we've cancel cultured them, but it hasn't been as black and white as watching Will Smith slap Chris Rock in the face. But we've still done cancel culture. So there's so many lines, and it's so it's so sticky.
Yeah.
But
I'm feeling super dizzy about the whole thing. Just because everyone's talking about it and everyone's got an opinion, right? And what I'm trying to do is pay attention to who is saying what and carefully considering all those perspectives. And it's really exhausting. Like, it's been 2 days, not even less than 48 hours, and I'm just exhausted talking about it. And it's funny because so my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law have very strong opinions of it, and my husband, you know, their family, he has a very different opinion about it. And I'm trying to pay special attention because, like, you know, my husband is black, his family is black, and they have, like, there are very opposing opinions within that small family of 3 people. But you know, the women love that Will Smith stood up for his wife and got angry on behalf of his wife. And didn't allow her to be disrespected in public. And I've been hearing a number of people talk about how black women are among the least protected people in America. So that is a very poignant perspective. And you know, Gary, my husband, is a social worker and doesn't like bullies. And so he thinks that Will Smith was absolutely in the wrong because he is a big, well-built guy who walked up to a smaller man in public and, you know, smacked him across the face and nothing was done. And, you know, Gary thinks that the little guy should have been protected, and that didn't happen. So, like, just listening to all the different perspectives, and it's so fraught, and very seldom do I hear a take on this that is wrong or that is, you know, easily sort of pointed to as, nah, that's not it. As I say, I'm super tired just because of the import of perspectives and the diversity of perspectives. I'm not really sure if we're ever going to be able to come to a consensus about what happened, what should have happened, why it was wrong, why it was right. Like, I don't know that we'll ever get there. I'd love to think that, you know, in hindsight, you know, 10 years from now or whatever, we'll have a clearer picture of it. But I think humans are just complicated, and there's so much going on in that one little snapshot moment that, you know, we're not going to be able to clarify.
I can give you a wrong opinion. Do you want me to give you a flat out wrong?
I would love to hear an opinion so I can tell you to shut your hole. That's what I've been longing to do.
You know whose fault it was? Timothy Chalamet's. No.
You know what? There's a person I love to
shirt, Chalamet. Wear a shirt. No. No, you know what? And I'll give you one more. As a man, and I mean, of all of these things that are infused with it, it just made me sad. It just made me sad. I was yesterday was a very sad day. And my wife said, what's bothering you? I said, you're going to laugh if I tell you. She's like, about that? I'm like, yeah. Because now I'm a big fan of Will Smith. I am a fan of Chris Rock. I'm a much bigger fan of Will Smith. and watching it happen, first of all, I thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
Like, I was one of the ones that totally thought it was a work. I was convinced until about 5 minutes later when the unedited footage was, somebody tweeted out, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh,
That's genuine anger right there.
oh. I mean, like, yes, I mean, like, I don't know. I was one of the ones that said, like, this is just an example of toxic masculinity in play. I think that he was right to be upset on behalf of Jada. He does laugh at first,
yeah,
and she shoots some anger. And I know what it's like to laugh awkwardly at something and then realize that you're upset about it after. Maybe that was it. Or maybe it was just that his wife said, hey, no, this is not okay.
Yeah,
this is not in bounds. And I believe they're both wrong. I think his joke was out of line. And I think that I think Smith is more out of line because he actually struck a person.
Yeah.
I am not, like, I don't know where to land on it, but it made me sad because it's like, oh no, like, it just, as a man, I can't stand men right now. It's like,
welcome.
It just broke me. It broke my heart.
Yeah.
And because I also think that it was that he made an emotional response. It was the wrong one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But when he was crying up on the stage giving his speech, did the PR person tell him not to apologize to him then? Because he looked like he was going to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I believed in the people are like, yeah, he faked it well. I mean, he did. I believe that was totally genuine.
Yeah.
And I also believe that he was caught in that moment where part of him thought he was right.
Right.
Part of him thought he was wrong.
Yeah.
And he didn't. And all of a sudden he's thrown in front of a microphone and they're like, here, make a speech.
Yeah.
Just do the one you rehearsed.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's still relevant.
Take out your notes from your pocket and just read those.
Yeah. Like, so, I mean, I like, but it made me sad.
Yeah.
And I will say this was funny. You know who I thought, I was like, dude, what are you doing? Anthony Hopkins.
What did he do?
No, you didn't watch. Neither of you watched. Okay.
I'm going to watch them. I just haven't had an opportunity.
Go back when you watch
it.
Okay. Watch Anthony Hopkins because he's next. He goes up to present the Best Actress award, which eventually goes to Chastain, of course, as we know. And he starts off with, Will Smith was right. And everyone's like, what? Because in his speech, he went on about, we need peace and love.
Right.
But so he said,
but there's a soundbite for you.
Will Smith was right. Awkward pause. We do need peace and love. And I'm like, oh, Anthony Hopkins. Listen, Hannibal.
Mr. Hopkins, what have you done?
It was like, it was incredibly awkward.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Now, so just one more thing and this is more of a question. Will Smith has issued an apology, which I actually appreciated.
Yeah.
Have we heard from Chris Rock? Has he talked about what happened at all?
No. He has not issued a statement.
I am very interested to see what he has to say about this. Like, is he going to wait until he's on the road doing comedy to bring it up and talk about it in that medium? Or is he going to issue a statement? Like, I'm very interested to see.
They have said he is not pressing charges.
Yes, I've seen that.
He has announced that.
I will say from an accessibility lens, though, when Will made his, one thing a lot of us forget, even I sometimes do, is when you share a graphic on Facebook, the screen readers don't read it very well. So if you're going to share I love you in a cute little heart, you should also put it in text comments at the top, right? In your text at the top. And he did do that. And so whether it's his PR person or whether it's him, somebody on his team is paying attention to the accessibility lens, which is nice. I think the problem about that moment is there's so many layers and the intersectionality is so huge. There's race, there's gender, there's ableism, like there's disability, like there's so many layers to that to that little tiny moment that I don't even know that we're ever going to be able to pull it apart.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Rock just tries to let it, because I think he does know that he was in the wrong. I think he knows that he made an inappropriate joke, and kind of wishes he didn't. And so I think I'm hoping this just kind of Chris Rock just lets it slide, but I don't think we'll ever know.
I predict next year's Oscars they come out and present together. That's my prediction. Yeah, because they're not the only ones that need to save face. The Oscars have to.
Yeah.
And the Moonlight year was Faye Dunaway.
I watched.
There you go. Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty. Yeah. They were the ones that flubbed it.
Right.
The next year,
they were given the wrong envelope, right?
Yes, they were. They were, but they were the ones that were perceived as the ones who flubbed it.
Right.
And next year,
envelope.
Yep. Next year, Best Picture, Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway marched right out there as well. I think that's where they go with it, and I think that they're going to both have to. Maybe not. Maybe this is like, apparently there's some deep-seated or some past issues, I should say, that between them based on last time Rock hosted, but I don't know. Anyway,
who knows?
Can we talk about something good?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about the movie CODA.
Let's talk about CODA.
Talk about CODA, which is both an acronym and a piece of
as music.
Musical vernacular.
Musical vernacular. That's the word I was looking for, but I didn't know it.
For those of you who have not seen it, CODA tells the story of Ruby, the only hearing member of a deaf family from Gloucester, Massachusetts. At 17, she works mornings before school to help her parents and brother keep their fishing business afloat. But in joining her high school's choir club, Ruby finds herself drawn to both her duet partner and her latent passion for singing. As always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers. But ladies, let's talk about something good. What did you think of CODA?
Deb, you go first, because I feel like my opinion is very different than most CODA's.
This is where Deb says this movie is bad, just to go against what I said.
This movie was worse than Wonder Woman 84. That's a previous episode where you can just hear me trash a movie with my husband. It was a wonderful moment in.
And I defended it.
It's true. And then we changed your mind, and now you hate it too.
True. You're not wrong.
But this movie. So this movie it was interesting. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. It was sort of mid for me. Like I had some issues with it, but I was very drawn in to it. So for the when did the movie come out? Last summer?
August.
And
on Disney, not Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus. Yeah.
So for the last number of months, I've had people texting me or bringing up this movie in conversation because
even I asked you about it a couple times.
Yeah, like people just saying, "Hey, have you seen this yet?" Because it reminds them of me. So, like my background, I am a CODA, right? I am a child of deaf adults. My mother is fully deaf, and my father was hard of hearing. So with hearing aids, he had amplified hearing. So it wasn't perfect, but he had quite a bit of it. And music was something that I was interested in from a young age. So a lot of people were like, "Oh, this movie's about Deb," and I'm like, "It's not." Having seen it now, there are similarities, obviously, but yeah, it was a very different experience to my growing up for a number of reasons, and so I did appreciate deeply that it was a different story. There was part of me that kind of found like the centering of the hearing person and the romanticizing of the hearing person as the fish out of water, which works also because there's boats and fishing. See what I did there? Yeah, so I mean, I kind of wished that, I don't know. I'm not sure how I would have told that story differently in order to better center the deaf community, but so yeah, I mean, I struggled with it, but at the same time was interested. Like I was captivated and like with them to the end. I cried. I absolutely cried in some of those key parts. And yeah, I thought it was good. I didn't love it, but it was pretty good. That's my summary.
For Deb, it was code. It was
a little higher than that.
CODA.
Sallyanne, what about you?
I would agree that it was good. I didn't realize it was an English adaptation of a French movie that had been made back in 2014. So I kind of want to see that.
Today I learned. No, it's
I
did no research.
I did not cry because I have a black heart, but I did find some moments.
Why it's gotta be black?
I found some moments that were pretty like, heartwarming for sure. I did not have both my parents are orally deaf. My dad, when we were growing up, was hard of hearing, so actually had quite a bit of hearing, especially with hearing aids. And my mother has been deaf since 5 for meningitis, like fully, totally deaf, almost got hit by a fire truck once, like completely deaf. It's a really good story, Deb. I should tell you later.
Yeah, I didn't know that about Trish.
Yeah.
I should also mention too that Sallyanne and I know each other because we went to church together as children.
Like I was 4.
And like, it was a deaf church.
Yeah.
So like this is our history as friends.
Okay.
So there were some things that I like that don't resonate with me. Like I have a brother and he is also hearing. And you know, we had family growing up and around us. So like it seemed like the Rossies are pretty isolated from their families. 95% of deaf people are actually born to hearing families. And it seems like both mom and dad are that dynamic. So like there's that part in the movie where she's like, can you call grandma? I don't want to use the interpreter. And so it seems like they don't have that relationship. And then there's another little key moment later, but I digress. As someone who did a lot of interpreting for my parents, especially my mother in my teen years, that I definitely shouldn't have done. I definitely resonated with Ruby in terms of like those doctor's appointments or
that doctor's appointment, man. So inappropriate on so many levels.
The boiled lobster claw is gonna be forever my favorite. But my 12-year-old, who's fluent in sign language because they've been attending deaf camp for years and is quite fluent and went to a deaf preschool. Their favorite part is when they pick up Ruby and they're doing rap. And my 12-year-old, sometimes I'll be like, why is Google so loud? And my 12-year-old will be like, my ass is vibrating. Like that's their favorite part, and they use the sign and everything, and that's their like Jem's favorite part is the ass vibrating. But I thought as far as a movie, like a piece of cinematic history, this is going to be the best snippet that accurately shows what CODA and deaf communities are like. You're never going to capture every CODA's experience and every deaf person's experience. You're not going to do that. But if you're going to combine it and pick the medium, I feel like this is going to be the most accurate piece of cinematic. I lost my English word, but the most accurate piece of film that you're ever going to see. TV shows, other films, this is it. This is the one that did their best job at being authentic and real and true. I have interpreted really shitty things that I should not have at 17, 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
I have been asked by my aunt to interpret my grandmother's funeral, and they just couldn't think to get an interpreter.
Yeah.
Right? Like
my brother, the like 3 or 4 days before his wedding, sent me a text and said, "You can interpret for mom, right?" And I went, "Absolutely not, but I'm going to do you a solid because I'm your sister and this is your wedding. I will take care of the interpreter for you." And that's when I called Sallyanne and I was like, "Who do I get?"
And I booked it for Deb.
Yeah, but it was great.
My grandmother died. I was in college to be an interpreter at the time. And my mom texted me that my aunt I'm really sorry, Aunt Marilyn, if you listen to this, but my aunt had said that me or my brother could do it. And a lot of CODAs, fun fact, most of us are not fluent signers. It's typically rare. You get one proficient signer out of a family generally. Sometimes you get a couple more, but we assume that CODAs are proficient signers, and we're not. That's just not true for every CODA across the board. I liked the movie. I thought it was good. I didn't love it. I found some moments were a little bit my favorite moment, I think, was when the teacher asked her to explain what singing meant to her, and she didn't have the English to explain that. There was an article that another CODA had written and said, no way would you ever spontaneously burst out into sign. I don't know the English word a lot of the time. And I use a sign to be like, this sign. I've done it a couple times in this episode. I don't know what English word I'd like to choose. So for me, that part was like authentic and true. And the fact that at 17, she's British, I'm really sorry because I don't know her name, that she was able to do an American accent. She was able to learn sign language.
Yeah, she learned American Sign Language. That wasn't a thing she had.
And there are a number of examples that we could point out, and I won't because I'm not mean, that where actors were like, I'm an actor, I can learn sign language, I can be a deaf character, and they can't. Boo, they cannot. She did it flawlessly. She did a fantastic job.
I'm really glad you thought so, because I thought that as well, but like, you are more involved with the deaf community. I mean, like, you're trained, you've got a whole bunch of educational background that I don't have, and so I was worried that something was going over my head. I was like, it looks really good.
She killed it.
She's better at sign language than I am, and my mother is deaf still.
There are a number of CODAs and some deaf community members that feel like a CODA would have been more appropriate for the role. I would argue that while the movie says CODA and the focus is about Ruby, this wasn't a movie about my experience or your experience. This was about the deaf community and about how deaf and hearing people live together and what that looks like, is what I would argue CODA was about. It wasn't about Ruby, and I don't think they could have having hired a CODA, I don't think you would have gotten a better experience. Having 3 phenomenal deaf actors was what you needed, and that's what they had.
Yeah, that was an excellent choice. Steve, what did you think?
I mean, it's funny listening to you both, because I loved the film. I still cry at that concert at the end, which
that's the bit that brings you to tears. You're talking about like her concert at school with the...
It's so beautiful when she sings and then she starts to sign, and I'm using my hands.
Oh, so not the concert, not the school.
No,
when she auditions.
I did love that scene when they cut the sound, because that was this is and therein lies my point. Because of my limitations and personal understanding, I would see that and say, this is the most accurate thing I've ever seen. I don't have the experience, so I'm watching them do it, and the family. And one of the things I loved about the film, forgive me, this may come out wrong, was that it was not trying to show you how wonderful the world was or anything. It was just trying to portray the normalcy.
Yeah.
From my experience, I was like, okay, this was not trying to. It was not an agenda to make them look like people with superpowers or anything like that. And Sean Hayter, from my understanding, had limited experience with the deaf community. And it's only been in recent years where we've seen some films, like you and I, Deb, spoke about Sound of Metal, which I adored. That was my best.
I actually had a conversation.
Done well too.
I had a conversation with Sallyanne in preparation for that podcast, because Sallyanne has a perspective that I think is important. And anyways, so Sallyanne has also seen it and has thoughts. Yeah,
I love that one, and I love The Quiet Place as well. I see it, and what I'm seeing is the deaf actors and actresses are being incorporated more into stories. And this was a story that didn't try and incorporate them in. It was a story that was just like, this is their family. This is the way their life is. And as a person who has almost no experience personally, hearing you two and like, well, this isn't quite accurate. This isn't quite accurate. For me, it was like, wow, this is a beautiful story.
The
And
authenticity was so real. Like there were so many moments that were like true to form, like so true to form. I again, I don't think you're going to get a better film that has a little snippet of deaf culture and what it's like to be a CODA ever again.
Yeah, and that's how I felt watching it. But again, I don't. That's how I felt, but I don't know if it's accurate. I mean, it's funny. Like you were both talking about how it wasn't accurate to this story, and I think it was you, Sallyanne, that said, "Well, you can't nail everyone's stories." And the thing is that this wasn't someone's story in the sense that this was not the story of actual person.
Like it wasn't a biopic.
It wasn't a biopic. It was a fictional story. So I was like, okay. But just the reality, it just felt like it was a very honest film to me. And I don't know if it was, but I'm hearing from you both, maybe it actually was, but it felt it. And this tension between the hearing world and the deaf community, I hadn't thought of it from that perspective before. Even listening to you before, Sallyanne, talking about accessibility to the Oscars.
Right.
I would be one that said, great.
Right.
Isn't that nice?
I'm hoping that I can get this podcast with subtitles, and now based on your comments, I'm dreading whether I should do that. It's like...
I would definitely do that, though. I absolutely would do that. Because it's access, right? But I think for me, the Oscars, it was like, we are going to get an interpreter, but then we're going to add all these extra barriers to it.
Right.
And so, like, why are you even having an interpreter in the first place?
Yeah.
Everybody should do subtitles on everything. It's not just for accessibility. It's for English as a second language. It's for a number of things, right? Subtitles are always great.
Yeah.
Steve. I'm a fan of your subtitles.
Which now I feel like I hope I can get, because I'm going to try. I think I know how to do it now. But no, so I mean, did I think it was the best picture of the year going back to the Oscars? I didn't.
What would your pick have been?
Of the ones I've seen, I think I missed, out of the 10, I think I missed about 4.
Okay.
I saw 1.
Was it this?
Was it? It was this.
And it wasn't even CODA.
Hey, so it is the best picture.
Times, unfortunately.
I felt I connected more deeply with Belfast, not because I'd been to Belfast, but I felt like I there was something about it that connected. I felt more connected to it. I would have been okay with Power of the Dog, but that film is dark.
Yeah.
So Belfast and CODA were the two that I was like, oh, good. Like, okay. So when CODA sort of swooped up in the last week,
right.
I was cheering it on because I found it a wonderful film. And no, I'm not the type that says, oh, it has to be a happy film and with a happy ending and all that stuff. There was something about it that I thought was very beautiful, and I appreciated that about it. But I mean, there were other films this year that I would probably say this again. We're going back to that conversation about what is best.
Right.
But I was very happy with the selection. I was thrilled with the selection personally. Let me ask you to let me ask you both about this. We talked a little bit about the relationship with the hearing community. I was wondering about building bridges, because this particular film, again, see, things that surprised me. I like being surprised in a film. I expected this to be a film where all the hearing community were just horrible. The whole hearing community was just horrible people. Like
super insensitive, yeah.
Yeah, and that wasn't the case. And even there was a tendency, they sort of explore a little bit of the fear of people like Marlee Matlin's character and Troy Kotzer, who didn't want to engage. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that relationship.
I got a lot, but maybe you want to go first, Deb.
No, I want you to go first.
Okay. I think that's actually the one thing they did really well. And I was just thinking about it in my head, because earlier I was like, it's so weird. There would have been a deaf school. There should be a lot of deaf people. But isolation of deaf people is actually really real, especially after they graduate. Like my mother has, I think, 2 deaf friends, and none of them live nearby. And she's not even culturally deaf like Marlee Matlin's character. And if you watch CODA very closely, it all boils down to a lack of exposure and ignorance for both sides of the fence, right? So there's that moment where Daniel's character is mad at Troy's character about something, and Daniel says, I'm gonna go for a drink with the boys. But before he puts his hand up to be like, I'm coming, the guys who are going look over at Daniel and say, are you coming? Like, right. Daniel knows they're going and they are going, but they specifically invite him before he even says, I'm going with them. So there was this like, just nobody knew how to do it. The deaf family didn't know how to bridge those gaps and make those connections, and the hearing community wasn't quite certain. And so that's the one thing I feel like the film did well, in that they showed that there was a willingness. When Troy stands up at that meeting and says, I'm out, and says a whole bunch of other explicit things, other fishermen followed. It wasn't just him. They were willing. That community was willing. Nobody just knew how to do it. And then towards the end of the film, where we're being set up for heartbreak about Ruby leaving, and it's this like whole big thing, we see that Troy and Daniel's characters are going out for beers with the boys, and the boys are trying to figure out how to learn a little bit of sign. We see that really beautiful joke where my mother actually asked me a couple of times, she was like, I missed the joke. And I was like, oh, there is no joke. Something is funny. I don't know what the joke is. We don't know what the joke is. But the point is that they're laughing together and they're building that relationship together. Like, that's the point. We just missed the joke. And it was done really, really beautifully. Like, super well done. And it just, the way Sean Hayter told that story, if you're watching it with that eagle eye, you see that the opportunities were there all along.
Yeah. I was also really interested to see the difference between the way that the parents, right, the one generation, did or didn't relate to the other people of the town and the other people in their industry. And their relationships or lack thereof. And how the son, the younger generation, he was he put himself out there. He was relating to people. He was making the effort. At the scene where he's talking to the guy who's ripping him off, right? And Ruby comes in and starts, like, she just interjects, and he gets really mad at her for interrupting. He's like, I had that, like, and she's like, oh no, like, you were getting ripped off and you had no idea. He was like, I knew what was going on. Like, you don't need to rescue me. Right. He was very intent on just being in the world and not needing anyone else, and not being afraid of presence and relationship and connection and communication. Right. Even though he had something that, he like, there was a communication barrier, but he was willing to do the work to get over it. And so that was really interesting to me. My mom always needed us to interpret for her. My mom would always back down from, like, a challenging situation in public if she was by herself. And my generation of people, I've noticed that the deaf people that are my age and younger, they are not backing down. Like, you are going to pay attention to me. You are going to respect me the way that you would respect anyone else, without, like, the barrier between us. And they figure out how to do it. They find a way. Like, they demand to be communicated with.
Technology plays a factor, right? So we see that mom doesn't want to use the video phone. And I don't think Ruby even says video phone. She just says use the VP. But Daniel's character is more than comfortable texting Ruby's friend at the bar to, like, chat. Like, is more than comfortable using his phone. And so I do think technology plays a big factor in that generational confidence for deaf people.
Well, and I love that, right? Like, it just makes me think that our species is going to improve, right? Because like with more confidence, with more ability to communicate, with more insistence that like, okay, this conversation that we're about to have is not going to be in the way that you usually have conversations with people, whether it's through sign language or, like the spoken word. Like we're going to figure it out, rather than just staying separate.
Yeah.
Gives me hope.
But it's still rooted in intentionality. Accessibility is essential. Obviously, it's essential, but the intentionality here is so important. And again, this goes back to being in a space of diversity. Like that was one of the things I appreciated, is that I like what you said there, actually, Sallyanne, because you said that the hearing community were willing to be on board. They just didn't know how to do it. Now, there were some people who were awful, because high school is always awful. You can't go into a high school in a movie and have it be a pleasant experience. But what I saw from across the board is once both sides came to a place where they said, no, this is important. I need to do this. And like you said, Daniel's character, Leo, I think he's Leo.
Yes, thank you.
Leo, he is doing those things, and he's frustrated because he feels like his parents are not acknowledging that he's willing to do those things, and I think that
they're depending on Ruby. So that's the other part of his decision, is that they're depending on Ruby, and he's like, I can stand on my own.
I can do it. Yeah.
I don't need her. I didn't mean to cut you off, Steve. Sorry.
No, that's fine. But that honestly, again, and this is one of the things I liked about it. I used the term normalcy before. Maybe it's just family. This is a family.
Yeah. That
although the situation is entirely specific, but there are dynamics at play that anybody can relate to. Like I can, the tension between siblings and in trying to understand, how they relate to their parents is an open theme or idea. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I understand this. So there was something so available about the film, which was, and also at the time I felt like all these details we have been talking about, like for me, they were eye-opening, and they were just like, oh, well, this is something I haven't seen before. And as Sound of Metal was a way that I was not experienced with it before, this to me took it sort of to the next level of that conversation. This was a spiritual sequel, if you will, to my experience of Sound of Metal, where Sound of Metal was sort of like, this is the world you don't understand. This is what the community's like. It was sort of like, this is the community in action.
And I would say the difference is that where Sound of Metal fell short is that they didn't use enough they didn't use enough deaf actors. They had one. They had Lauren Riddoff, and then they had two hearing people play deaf characters. And I think that's where they fell short in terms of their authenticity. My circle these days is mainly CODAs who happen to be interpreters, and most of them loved the film. And I think CODA was an excellent generalized view of what the deaf community is very much like, and what being a hearing person within a deaf family looks like, and trying to build those bridges for sure. I did want to talk about that moment though, where Ruby doesn't show up to work, and so her parents lose the boat. And because I think there'll be a lot of non-deaf people who blame Ruby in that moment. And
go off, let's hear it.
Well,
I'm excited.
It's not Ruby's job. Exactly. She's 17, and frankly, they knew the rules. You're trying to tell me that he is a fisherman who has been fishing his whole life, and he doesn't know that he needs a hearing person on board? He chooses to go out with the at-sea monitor without Ruby on board,
and without telling her that he's deaf halfway through the journey.
They just hoped that she wasn't going to find out in like the 8 hours they're friggin' out on the water. And where she did wrong too, where she did wrong is that she knew they were deaf, and she let them be open to trauma, because that scene, it's a movie, but had that happened in real life, it could have gone really badly.
Yeah.
There was no need, even in fake universe movie land, for her to let the Coast Guard board that boat without telling them. Like, even in La La Land, that's not true. That was I think traumatic for a lot of deaf people who probably watched it. I know it was a little bit traumatic for me, knowing that the Coast Guard was coming and they couldn't hear it, and I knew it was fake.
Right. Well, that's the point of movies, right? Is to give you as close an experience as possible.
It just shows that, like, there are people out there who are still so ignorant. She didn't pick up on the fact they were deaf for hours, and then set them up badly. Yeah. Right.
Well, this is an important conversation. I'm so glad you brought this up, because this was another. I'm thrilled, because this is one of the things I want to talk about. I mean, you've both had this experience as well. This idea, the film really looks at Ruby's tension between expectations and trying to carve her own life.
Yeah, that she's a kid, like she's a kid.
So, I mean, can we speak to that? I'd like to know from your opinions how you felt it was portrayed in the film. From your own experiences.
I was hesitantly a little bit nervous that it was going to end really badly and she was going to stay. I almost swore again. I have such a potty mouth. It goes with my black heart. But I was really nervous that she was going to stay after she got blamed heavily for that whole fiasco, which wasn't her fault. She's a child.
Yeah.
I was super nervous that's how it was going to end. Just like that, you know how sometimes movies like end as they start?
Yeah.
And it started so beautifully with her singing on the water. I really thought that's how the movie was going to end, and I was about to like throw popcorn at my television. I was going to be like livid and be like, I hate that movie. And so I was really glad though that, you know, for all the shitty parenting moments we saw where Marley was like, you know, music at the table is rude because we can't all do it together, and if I was blind when you want to paint, and you know, here's a dress even though I know you like for all those shitty moments that we saw, I was really glad that in the end it was like, we are adults and you are a child and you want to go to sing, so let's do that. And when they say like, if we're going to kick you out, we're doing this as a family, I did shed maybe one tiny little black tear.
They got you.
I thought it was really cute. And then like when she started signing that Joni Mitchell song.
So
come on, yeah.
Tell me about it, Deb.
I loved. Okay, so as a fan of Joni Mitchell, first of all, I thought that was a beautiful choice. So like, I have made a living singing in churches in communities that let me choose lots of different music. I am not bound to a hymn book or any particular catalog. Beautiful. And Joni Mitchell shows up a lot in church for me.
I personally know that's true.
Yeah. So so song choices in films are important. Very, very important. When they used Just a Girl in Captain Marvel, instead of Barracuda, I was mad. I was very, very mad. That was a poor choice, and they should have called me because I would have fixed it for them. Like, bad.
Note to Marvel. Learn some things here.
Friggin' call me.
Call Deb.
Clear it by Deb, and then we'll put it on screen.
For things like accessibility and music choices.
Thanks. But so in this, I thought the song choice specifically for her audition piece was really, really beautiful, because she is this sort of linchpin of perspective for the film. She has an insight to the deaf world and to her family that other people don't have. She has an insight into her family that even members of her family don't have.
Yeah.
And she also has a perspective in the hearing world that a lot of the hearing people don't have. So like she has looked at things from so many different sides, and so that was a perfect choice. I have to do more research to find out who the music director of this film was, because like you get
it's Mr. B. It's Mr. B.
I don't get the joke. Who's Mr. B?
That was her teacher.
Yeah, Mr. V.
Mr. V?
No,
Mr. V.
I can't roll my R's. So you call him Mr. V if you can't roll your R's. Don't embarrass yourself.
Don't.
You know what, Sallyanne? Deb didn't watch this movie. She's looking it up as we go along.
She watched it once, and I watched it like 4 times.
I watched the movie. I didn't watch the.
She saw the trailer and she thinks she understands it all, and that's what we have here.
I mean,
but are you ready for a second Sallyanne surprise? Did you know?
Never.
Did you know that hearing is not a word people outside of the deaf community per se use? When you use things like hearing and deaf, some people will go, huh? Because, and my mind was blown when I learned this interpreting college, it's deaf or non-deaf. It's not a term that we use colloquially everywhere. I think now that the film is kind of using it, people are using it more, but until last August, you would say, I'm a hearing person, and somebody would likely say, pardon me? Because it's deaf and
because
non-deaf.
it would just be presumed that,
yeah,
of course you can hear.
It was like my mind blew. I was like, people don't use that word?
Yeah.
Because I had used it at the time, I think I was like 30 years of my lifetime, right?
That is mind-blowing. Can I just go back to the song, though? So that's a little Sallyanne interjection. So not only was the song choice really beautiful, but I love that they made me wait for the moment where she combined sign language and music.
Yes. And she did it so friggin' beautifully.
Absolutely. I was kind of hoping, like, I actually expected that she was going to start signing at the school concert when she was singing You're All I Need to Get By. Because, like, that would be a beautiful thing to sign to your family.
But that would have been too cheesy, I think.
And absolutely. I was like, oh, she's going to do it. And I kind of wanted her to, but I kind of didn't. Yeah. And so I thought the choice to just take away the audio was actually really beautiful. Yeah. But I found myself a little disappointed that she hadn't signed it. So when we get to the audition and her family sneaks in and she starts signing it while singing it so beautifully, I was like, okay, that's what I needed. Thank you for making me wait for it. It was so good. Like, it was really, really rewarding. There were so many things that I loved about that scene.
I, for one, loved that there wasn't tokenism of the signing at the school concert, but that they were talking about what they were going to do for dinner. Because they're bored.
Oh, the buttons on my shirt are mismatched. Crap.
Because they're bored. But at the audition, even before Ruby starts signing, they are mesmerized. They're sitting there like this. They got tears in their eyeballs. You're not going to find a better snippet of deaf culture. You're really not. They did it so well and so authentically. And like, I don't think I could have signed that song as well as she did. And I went to school to be an interpreter.
Yeah. Well, remember my dad's like ASL choir?
Yeah. Yeah, it was beautiful.
So like my dad was, hard of hearing person. So he had, some of his hearing, loved music. He was the one that like sat in the back of the church with the boombox and like played songs. Like we didn't have like a worship team up at the front of the church. He would play audio, and we would sign along to it. Like there was acetate on a, what do we call it? The projector. And someone was like the bouncy ball kind of at the top, and we were all signing to it.
You could reuse that acetate by just taking an alcohol swab to it.
Yeah. Until we started printing on them, and then we just saved them because we sang songs more than once.
And then this is the key point, Deb. Say it one more time about the deaf church with the.
So you had someone who was moving like a pencil or whatever across all the words as they were being sung, so that people could sign along to it if they couldn't hear the music. And like my dad loved music so much, and this is why there was no resistance in my family when I started showing interest in music. My dad loved music so much, and his thing for Karen Carpenter is unparalleled. Like, I think he loved Karen Carpenter only slightly less than he loved my mom. He was just actually in a relationship with my mom, so she got preference. But so he ended up gathering a group of people from the church, and they would actually like they did performances. They chose songs. They had like a whole catalog of songs that they would do, and they would go from church to church, hearing churches, deaf churches, and they would perform. And it was like there was a whole choreography to it, and like that's like one of the things that I am proudest of when I think of my dad, was that he was able to sort of harmonize that a bit and to intersect those two things. Yeah, the outfits left something to be desired because it was the late 80s. So, you know, if we ever find a clip, I'm just going to warn you about that. But yeah, it was really beautiful. And so it reminded me of that as well. Like that was, yeah. It was good.
I'll tell you why I didn't love CODA though, and I'll bring it all the way down just for 1 second. So I watched it by myself for the first time. I watched it on my phone because I was like, I don't know what I'm watching, don't know what my emotions will be. So I watched it by myself, but then I invited my mother over like the good CODA that I was, knowing that she doesn't have Apple Plus. I said, come watch this movie. Marlee Matlin's in it. Troy, you're gonna love it.
You'll love it. It'll be great.
You'll love it. You'll be great. So she comes over. She loves it. The ass vibrating. She loves it. But then
everyone loves when your ass vibrates.
At the end of the movie, though, she turns and looks at me, and I say, "Oh, how'd you like it?" And she was like, "Yeah, it was really good." She was like, "But you know, I feel better." And I was like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, your childhood wasn't that bad. I didn't depend on you like that." And for me, that's where CODA like brings up a lot of like icky feelings for me, I think, because it was such a snippet of like a good time for that family. And while my childhood wasn't that, like I definitely wasn't dependent on, I've had some pretty shitty moments as a CODA, and I think for every CODA, it's like it's a very weird emotion to be a CODA, but in that moment, it felt like my mom was like, yeah, I was a great parent and I never depended on you for anything. And when I do depend on you, it's totally fine. And that for me was like the part that I feel like the show, like the movie couldn't show and didn't show. But like when I say, hey, I had this really shitty moment with my mother the other day, is someone going to remember CODA and then be like, it can't be that bad?
Right.
Because I've only had one moment versus a lifetime. Right. So for me, that was where I was like, good movie, but it can be really hard to be a CODA. Like we saw that doctor's appointment, but what have we not seen that Ruby has had to interpret, or any CODA has had to interpret in their lifetime?
Yeah.
I did like how that we got to see her with her peers. And how they ostracized her, even marginally, right? Like, because as they got older, you know, and again, as Steve said, like movies that if there are any scenes in high school, like you're bound for misery. Yeah. But learning about how she sounded like a deaf person as a kid, that was really interesting. I had never thought of that before.
It's true for a lot of CODAs.
Yeah. Yeah. And
they have to take speech therapy when they get to school.
I had no idea, right? Because like my father had the majority of his hearing when his hearing aids were in. So like my family was like mixed, right? Like I didn't have like a fully deaf family, and so like I had no idea, and it just it opened my eyes a bit to an experience that was, you know, even more in depth as a CODA than mine was. So I appreciated that. I also really loved, okay, so first of all, let's talk about Ferdia Walsh Pilo, or is it Pilo Walsh? The kid who played her love interest, Ruby's love interest.
Oh, yeah.
So he's an Irish actor. I recognized him right away. I was so excited.
Like, he's in this movie, and I was like, I have no idea who you're talking about.
He's the lead from Sing Street, which is a film that takes, exactly.
I have no idea.
Are you gonna go run and grab the DVD and show?
I was about to.
Please do, because I have no idea what Deb's talking about.
Oh, it's Sallyanne, wonderful! I love Sing Street.
It is such a beautiful. It's fun and it's intense, and it's like there's a whole bunch of great things going on there.
Right.
Gary always talks about it because he's like, I would never like just watch that movie on my own, but whenever. He's like, whenever you put it on, I'm always really excited because it's probably the best musical film I've ever seen.
Right.
And like we both have a penchant for like, British, Irish, Scottish TV and film because like there's just something about it that's a little more natural and it's a little more palatable to us than a lot of like US Hollywood stuff. But anyways, so seeing him, I was like, oh, okay, this could be real good. So first of all, that performance, lovely, big fan. But the moment between him and Ruby where she finds out that he's told other people about that super awkward conversation that, the parents had because they, overheard the parents having sex and then they had to have a sex talk afterwards and you better be wearing a condom and all this sort of stuff.
Which she didn't interpret.
Well, no, because, and like, I will fully admit there are things that I have not told my mom that people have said. Like I have filtered the interpretation and vice versa, stuff my mom has said that I have not said to people. So yeah, I mean that's something important to point out because a lot of people wouldn't have catched that she sort of like conveniently did not share that part of what her parents have said to him. And so when it finally comes out that when he's trying to talk to her about it, even though she's so mad, he's like, I wasn't talking about it, making fun of them. I was talking about the situation and how like it was so unexpected. And then your parents were so cool and you guys have this awesome family. And it wasn't tokenizing. I thought it was a really important thing where she got to, she would have appreciated it more if she wasn't so angry and so embarrassed. But I really appreciated his take on that whole situation where he wasn't like, the weirdo deaf people in that house. Like he was like, look at this like he saw in them, in their family, what he didn't have at home. And it was really nice to have someone outside of the family kind of see them as idealistic or idyllic. And I really loved that. And it was kind of a shame. I mean, I would assume that in their world, Ruby would have eventually begun to appreciate that. But in the moment, she couldn't appreciate it because she was just so mad and embarrassed.
She did, right? Like they ended up cultivating a relationship together that was like quite sweet. But I thought it was a really sweet like moment, and I think that's true. I know I have been like, my family sucks because it's like all this whatever, but it's a great reminder, I think, for all CODAs and people in general that sometimes we have what other people don't.
Well, this is an incredible conversation. I'm loving it. I got to wrap us up just for time. I'm so thankful.
There are children.
There are children. There are children upstairs.
I need to go home. I'm still at work.
So let's screen it or skip it. CODA, screen it or skip it.
Screen it.
Yeah, definitely screen it.
Yeah, skip it.
Definitely.
No.
How dare you?
Rude.
Ableism.
It's trash. Don't look up Best Picture of the Year. No. If you can get DiCaprio and J-Law in the same movie, no, I'm kidding. No, I wish I kind of like that movie, but no, absolutely screen it. This was a wonderful film.
Great.
Well deserving of the win last weekend, I thought. Well deserving. It was charming. It felt honest. It was warm.
Movement, right? Like it's a movement. Like it's not really a movie. It's like a movement. It's bringing a piece of history forward and saying, deaf people can do anything but hear. Yeah. And it's something the deaf community has been trying to say for years. So definitely screen it.
A movement is also musical vocabulary. Well done.
Oh, win.
Cha-cha. That was both a symphonic interpretation and the Netflix sound. You're all welcome.
Wasn't that a song in the 90s? It's a Netflix symphony, something like that.
Different. So different.
Back then you had to mail for your Netflix.
It's true.
It's true.
That came in handy when you lived in the, Northern Irish rural farm landscape. Those DVDs coming in the mail, they helped a sister out. Let me tell you.
I don't know what to take from that.
Yeah. It's a little snapshot of Deb's life.
I was like, I don't remember that, but I was younger.
My time as an Irish lass was a very different experience. Honestly, to you both, thank you. Sallyanne, Deb, thank you. This is just incredible. I really appreciate your honesty and your thoughts. I appreciate that greatly. For you at home, a reminder that you can find us wherever podcasts are available. And you can, of course, like and subscribe to us on YouTube.
Do it, like and subscribe.
There's a chant.
Do it. If you want like arbitrary theme songs or like, like little stings and little, just call me, man. I'll do it.
We'll talk.
You click the bell.
There you go.
I don't know how to do that, so you might have just been playing
it.
Oh, you did it.
Click the bell right there.
Boop boop. So now you just have to impose the little.
I have to impose a bell.
Yeah.
No, it does it automatically on YouTube.
Ooh.
For subscribing, and it's already there.
I don't know if I know how to do that.
We're learning so much. See, the younger generation is teaching us.
Steve, I was gonna say too, I can help you with YouTube. Actually, does subtitles really well. It's one of the better platforms, so I can help you with that if you need it.
I do. Please.
Yeah.
Yes, because I do. Especially, I do want to have that as an option for sure.
Then I can show my mother this.
Yay!
Hey! Hi, Trish.
Sally just said, "Hi, Mom."
Yeah, I said hi, Mom. Yeah, I can show you. YouTube is actually one of the better platforms to make it very accessible.
Excellent. Okay, great.
Bye, friends.
The end.
And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.